Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sandbox with me, Odrin Johnson. This week I am delighted to have had two amazing guests on this week. We have Paul Tyre from Thistledew Gaming and Dunks from the Gamers Watch podcast. This week we talked about all the amazing indie games we've been playing and our special spotlight piece on Flynn, Son of Crimson. So there's plenty to unwrap this week, and if you're looking for that next new indie game to try out, look no further than here. If you've got any comments about what games you've been playing at the moment or any amazing titles that you think are coming up on the horizon, please don't be afraid to leave them down in the comments down below. And so not to delay any longer, enjoy.
Jesus. Right, well, welcome back everyone. Thanks a million to our previous guests there now. So we have two wonderful people joined with us this week. We have Dunks from the Gamers Watch podcast and we have Paul Tyre from Thistledew Gaming. Big fans of both your work, guys, so thanks so much for coming on, first of all. What is the sort of games we're going to be looking at this week? I know, Paul, you sent me on two pieces you wanted to talk about, and Duncan, you did the same as well. Maybe, Paul, if we start, maybe you jump out the gates with maybe one of your games you want to talk about.
Out the gate. I like what you did there.
Nice pun, that.
So my first game that I was going to talk about is Lemnis Gate. It's a fantastic first-person shooter game, but it's totally different than any other first-person shooter games I've actually played. So we were actually going to do a video on this, but sadly the audio corrupted, which was just joyful. But we played quite a bit of it, myself and Zoe, and basically the game works as a PvP game, and it starts off as a standard kind of first-person shooter where point, shoot, try and kill your opponents, but it's turn-based, which kind of makes it sound kind of strange. So when you're playing it, you've got like this range of characters, and you play as all the characters on your team, and you move in. It's objective based, so there's a couple different game modes, but I'll just use the domination game mode as a general kind of rule of thumb because most games have that. And you take a turn with one character to go and capture that objective, and then the other person, so in my case it was Zoe, would then take her turn with her character, and every single time you have a turn, it then resets 25 seconds back, and every character that you play out goes out onto the field as you played them, so like ghosts almost, like in old racing games. And then your objective is the best way I can describe it's like a game of chess. So you've got to try and do things in the game to try and stop your opponent from gaining that objective. So if I had a guy that was capturing A, Zoe would then deploy someone to try and stop him capturing A. But then when I take my next turn, I can deploy someone and I'm chasing after Zoe's character to try and take them out from stopping them taking me out from my first turn. It's this big rotation of constantly trying to prevent the other person from achieving what they're trying to achieve, but also trying to get the objective yourself. So it becomes really complex and quite complicated. And then you've got every character with unique abilities, and it just becomes a bit of madness, but it's so much fun. We had such fun playing it. Well, I had more fun than Zoe did because she was getting annoyed at me, but it is a wonderful game. The only thing really for me though that it fell short on was that when you go to search for maps, so you can do 2v2 or you can do 1v1, and you can either have simultaneous or turn-based. So simultaneous means that you both take your first move at the same time, but so you can kill each other like in a normal first-person shooter. But then the 25-second reset happens each turn anyway, so it still happens where your character that you just moves exactly how they moved before. But the issue is when we went to go and do 2v2, there was no one in the lobbies, which was really disappointing because the game has so much potential, like so much, but it just fell short in that area. So I suppose like the one thing I wish this game had was just a bigger player base, because it is honestly fantastic, and it's such a unique idea with, we've got so many first person shooters on console, on PC, but this one is so unique in the way that it plays that it's a shame that it's kind of just not really been noticed. So I hope it does get noticed, and I hope it does get the player base it deserves, because it is fantastic in the way it works.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting one because I remember it kind of shadow dropped almost on Game Pass around August time, didn't it? And I remember seeing it at the time and thinking this is just another generic first-person shooter. At least it seemed like in the vein of something like an Apex Legends, but more sort of team v team sort of thing. And I mean, from what you've described, it sounds a lot more complex and actually probably a bit more interesting. And if I had known that at the time, I probably would have picked it up.
Yeah,
it almost felt too big brain to be played by loads of people, because I had one or two goes on it, and I'll happily admit that I'm not clever enough to be any good at it, because it's not just like having like, you know, your first person skill. Like Paul said, it's like chess, and you're constantly thinking not only 5 moves behind but 5 moves ahead. But I agree, it's a massive shame because it is fantastic.
it's funny that you say that about thinking 5 moves behind and ahead, because I was saying that when me and Zoe were playing it, and I was running about and I was like, right, I've done what I initially needed to do, but now I need to quickly think, and you've only got 25 seconds. Like, that's not a lot of time to move around this map. They are quite small maps, but 25 seconds is not a lot of time. And I'm like, but where do I want to place that character? And I found myself firing RPGs and stuff onto random stair sets in the hopes that Zoe would run down that stair set on that, say, 24-second mark, that then she would get hit by it. You know, you're kind of almost like you're setting up guesswork because you're kind of anticipating your opponent's move before it happens. The one thing that I did like about it as well is that when you're not playing in the turn-based, you use a drone and you can follow about the other player, and you can see where they're going to kind of make their move, and you can put down like a point of interest, so you can flag a point on the map, so you can be like, right, okay, I know at 17 seconds they stop there to shoot my guy, and then you're like, right, so you're running in the map the next turn at 17 seconds, you're like, right, I need to shoot that bit because that's where they're going to be, so you can really plan it like ahead. But yeah, it is that kind of big brain games. It is complex if you make it complex, but I really enjoyed it.
I think usually I'd be gracious and hand over to the second guest, but I have such a good sort of segue link into one of my games that I'm going to steal it away from you. Don't come here for a second. We mentioned chess a good bit. I don't know if any of you heard of this new game that came out last Thursday, Shotgun King, the final checkmate.
And other to the white side had gone all his subjects. Before leaving, a black bishop gave him a warning. Told him his wrath would be his undoing. But the king knew.
Is this something that's completely gone over people's radar? Because I really hope it is, because I really enjoyed it. Think of chess, but think of the fact that the king in this case, who you're playing as, all of the other pieces have decided he's a shit king and they're going to not help him in the fight. So it's just the king, and he's only armed with a double-barrel shotgun against regular chess pieces. And it's completely fucking bonkers. It's a turn-based deck-building roguelike action game, and it's like you go through pretty much each segment. It'll just be you versus, I suppose, gradually increasing levels of enemies per floor. And of course, the goal in chess as always is to get the king. So you can literally bypass a load of people and literally stick the double barrel in the king's face and shoot him. But for the most part, each time you progress a floor, you're able to pick this brand new buff to either your weapon or to your movement. But it'll also have the adverse effect of giving a buff to your enemy either. So it'll turn, I don't know, sometimes it'll turn a bishop into a queen, or take away a bishop but add 6 pawns. And when you get to the later rounds, if you've got like 20 pawns on one side coming at you, it can be quite quite scary at times. I say scary in the spooky sense of the word, but I was so blown away when I saw this, because it's one of those things, you know, you see an indie game on Twitter and you're like, oh, this kind of looks cool, but the dev hasn't released it yet. So it's like, well, guess I'll follow you and completely forget this exists. But funnily enough, I was talking to Mike Zoke the other week. Oh shit, yeah, I remember this, and I was like immediately downloaded, because it's only £5 on Steam. So I thought, you know what, why not? So that's the sort of game I played this week. Completely insane, infuriating, quite difficult on harder modes as well, and it made me realize that, you know, all those years scrounging away, not getting girls in chess club was not worth it at all. So completely messed up my life there. So no point. Why not just give him a shotgun? Why not just do that?
That sounds like the most random game concept. I love it.
Yeah, it's so good. What's the name of the guys that do it? Pun cakes is what they're called. So or poon cakes. I doubt it's called poon cakes, let's be honest. On top
I hope it is.
Jeez, it's going off the rails. Duncan, jump in here. What game do you want to talk about before I make an arse out myself?
So my first one, it hasn't got a good good segue, unfortunately, or anything to do with poon or mates. I don't know. So my golf club Wasteland.
Explain in me this project called humanity.
The richest people on the planet are racing towards Mars, while Earth races towards a climate catastrophe.
Which I played and reviewed last year on the Games Watch. So like gameplay wise, it's just like a proper run of the mill 2D game of Crazy Golf. I mean, it doesn't sound that exciting, but the thing that I got proper enamored with it is the setting and the story. So it's basically the wasteland that you're playing golf on is a post-apocalyptic Earth. So you're an astronaut who fancies a round of golf, but the super fat cats who have naffed off to Mars or the moon or whatever have turned Earth into a golf course, and you're just playing through that. And you know, gameplay wise is absolutely fine. You know, it's just your standard 2D game of mini golf, which you can probably imagine how it would play out. But the thing that really like probably blew me away, and I actually cried by the end of it because I'm a right soppy tit, is that the entire time when you're playing it, there's a I think what's it called, radio nostalgia, and it's basically like playing some of the hits from back before Earth got blown, like blown to smithereens. But it's also like people kind of calling in and telling stories about how they used to live and what life is like now, like living on Mars. And the thing that really hit me, so this was I think I played it last year. It came out, I think it's been out a few years, but it came out on Xbox last year. And this is when kind of everyone twigged that Brexit was the worst possible outcome for the United Kingdom. And as you're going through it, there's perhaps it's kind of completely unintentional, but there were kind of just loads of little bits where like, oh, that's actually happening now. This is a real bummer. But it was like that real kind of emotive feeling I was getting from it that properly got it hooks into me. Hi, I can't talk, guys. Got its hooks into me. And there's one bit in particular. So there's a building in the background, like when everything else is debris around you, but there's a big neon sign on it. I think it said like Brexit Land or Brexit City or something like that. And it almost felt like the developers were taking a piss out of us. But this is what your country is going to turn into. I don't mean to make it political. But as you're going through, you unlock little diary entries of what happens, and there's basically like a child who was born on the wasteland follows you around, and as you go through, you unlock more and more of the story, and then by the end of it, I felt, it's gonna sound really weird, I felt so miserable and like brokenhearted by the end of the game. I absolutely loved it because like the older I'm getting, the more cynical I am of AAA games, and every experience is absolutely the same. The fact it triggered some sort of emotional response to me, I was like, bloody hell, I do feel something. But it was brilliant. And then they've announced a sequel, which is following the child you see during the game. It's really amazing. And when you complete it, they send you a link to download the soundtrack. But on its own, it's got some like proper bangers in it. But just listening to some of the entries and people kind of lamenting how good life used to be before they were like having to boil their piss to shower in and that kind of thing. I can hear my cat meowing. Brilliant. Golf Club Wasteland. Superb.
I love that idea of having a soundtrack at the end of the game given to you. That's so cool.
It's brilliant. I've got it saved on my PC. It's really like an exceptional game because you might look at it and be like, nah, it looks alright, but it's phenomenal. Really, really something special.
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of Steam games are doing more often. Is you can usually buy a bigger edition to get the soundtrack along with it, which is a really cool way of doing it because usually the main way before supporting, I suppose, indie artists or composers online was to buy through Bandcamp, and then because usually Spotify is fuck all really for them whenever they get a stream or whatever. So Bandcamp's usually the way to go. But is the soundtrack comes free with it? Is it?
Yeah. So I bought the game, and then when you complete it, you I can't remember if it's within the game and you just follow the link, or so I played it on Xbox. I can't remember exactly how, but yeah, maybe I got emailed a link or what, I can't quite remember. But yeah, I got a soundtrack for free at the end of it, and it's phenomenally good. Sure, probably did win an award for it, but yeah,
probably. I mean, usually do. I mean, it's so difficult to keep track of every fucking award that comes up nowadays.
Yeah,
somebody's probably got an award somewhere for it, and hopefully so by the sounds of it. Paul, any cool links between Tainted, Grail, Conquest, and Golf Club?
Do you want to know how to survive out there? The truth is, you won't. You will fall every single time.
It's kind of apocalyptic. I suppose that kind of
the world
was
tainted
to some extent. Yeah.
We'll take it, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So yeah, Tainted Grail is this roguelike deck builder. And I'm not somebody that is particularly fond of deck builders. Like, I used to love card games. Like, so when I was younger, I played, like, obviously Pokemon cards, come on. And I played Yu-Gi-Oh! And I collected Magic the Gathering cards and things like that. So I've always had an interest in that kind of stuff. But I downloaded Tainted Grail just randomly off Game Pass, and it's based on a board game that I think was done through Kickstarter, actually. Really random that it got like a video game from first kind of look, and I did a wee bit of reading into it because I was interested in the board game, which is very, very expensive, by the way. It's like 120 quid for the most basic version. I was like, I'll just stick to the video game for now, thanks. But the game is awesome. So you've got a selection. So it starts you off that you can only play as one character, but there's a selection of like several different characters. They all have different abilities, and you take a different approach with each character in like throughout the journey of the game. So what happens is you end up in this world called the Weirdness, and it's kind of like a space between realities, I suppose. It's not real, but it's also not, like, it's like a kind of space in between planes of reality. That's probably more accurate. And what you're doing is you are progressing through this to meet different characters, and at first you're trying to get a person in your village. So you start off in this little village and you go out this big main gate, and in the village there's, I think, 4 or 5 main gates around it. I haven't gotten through them all yet because I'm not good enough, but I'm getting better. But the really cool thing is as you progress through the game, so you have this linear kind of map that you go into as you leave the gate, and you kind of approach random encounters. So there'll be like random enemies just kind of plotted about the map. And what you do is you approach an enemy and it starts a battle. And in that battle, you get a selection of cards that come up, and you use them to either attack, defend, give yourself shield. It's very complex, and it becomes really complex, and there's loads of kind of buffs and stuff like that you add to your character, or debuffs to the enemies and stuff like that. So you can play it at the most basic level, or you can play it at like 1,000 IQ if you're that smart and you want to read every single card that is accessible in the game. But the thing I really like about it is that it's got like a load amount of lore in it that's actually really quite interesting. So as you defeat enemies, you often then get introduced to an NPC. So you defeat an enemy and there's like an NPC that's behind them, and you'll speak to them. And it could be like a wicked witch, or it could be a blacksmith. And what they'll do is they'll give you a quest. And that quest, I've got quests that are sitting there from the first run that I've done, and I'm only completing now. And I've been playing this game on and off over the space of probably 3 months. And the thing I really like about it is that it's the way that it kind of carries the lore over. So you'll meet a character that talks about another character that you've never met, and then after, say, 6 or 7 other runs, you'll maybe reach that character eventually, and then they'll give you something else, and it builds up. But every single run you do, you gain like an XP kind of thing over a bar, and that unlocks new characters. But alongside that, it also unlocks new cards that you can get when going around the world. So you are limited at the beginning. So there's maybe a selection, like there's like a small selection of cards when you first start that you get as you play through the kind of linear world that you're in. And then as you die and come back into the game and try again in your standard roguelike fashion, you will get new cards that will become available on your quest. So every single time you do a run, it's a new quest. But the people that you find when you're out on your quest that come back to your village stay in your village, and you can buy things from them before leaving on your journey. So you can kind of build up your character as you go. So with every single area, there's like a boss that's like a big giant. I think the first one's a big golem, a big rock golem, and they're quite hard to defeat. So you kind of have to go around, defeat the minions first, and then go and approach the boss laterally. But you can actually, if you want to, just walk straight up to the boss on your first go. Wouldn't recommend it. You're probably just going to get absolutely burst, but you could try. But it's such a. I've played Slay the Spire that's in Game Pass. I don't know if you've played that. It's like a, I don't want to say that because I like Slay the Spire, but it's like a better version. So you walk about in third person. The graphics aren't anything spectacular, in all honesty. They're not. But it's not about the graphics. It's the gameplay that's just so well done in regards to deck builders that you feel like every single run, you feel like you're earning something. So even if you die on the first boss and you fought him 20 times, you're not that fast because you're going to gain that XP, you're going to unlock a new character potential, you're going to unlock new cards, and you also unlock like buffs around the world as well. And it's just got this kind of mysterious, spooky lore around it, and this being on a different kind of astral plane and stuff. And I just love it. I love the element of the way the cards work, because they don't feel like any of them are too powerful. There's not kind of, I haven't found that there's a specific character that I can go and pick and just wipe out everything. You have to really think about whether or not you're going to kind of go for an attack sometimes, and whether you're going to kind of defend or put shields on your character, whatever. And my favorite character is the summoner, which basically means that you summon other monsters to fight on your behalf. So you don't actually do any attacks with your character. It's all with the characters that you kind of build up. And my favorite part of it is I came across a wolf and I saved it, and now every single run I get, I can actually activate my wolf to come with me and deploy him as a card. And he's a really, because you've got like a number pool and how much energy you've got to play cards each turn, and he's only like one, and he attacks every single turn without actually activating him as well. And and you can pet him, you can pet the dog. It's great. So yeah, it's a really interesting deck builder, and it's probably one of my favorite that I've come across ever, to be honest, on like a games console that isn't like physical in hand cards. I love it, absolutely love it, and that's why I looked at buying the board game, but sadly it's way out of my price range right now.
And is it content rich, or is it just difficult to get through that it feels like it's a lot longer?
I haven't reached the end, so I actually couldn't say, but it feels, to be honest, like it feels like, yeah, it could be repetitive. It depends what your interest is in the game. If you're looking for something that's really diverse in the enemies and the graphics and things like that, then it might not be for you. But if you're interested in kind of getting the best cards you can get, and it is luck of the draw, and you know, in regards to the things that you unlock as you're moving about and when you defeat certain enemies, because you speak to certain people and they'll give you cards and things that you can use on that run, or they'll give you there's kind of passive buffs you get as well that you can, when you level up. So you level up your character individually in the runs as well. It's going to start sounding complicated now. So you level up your characters individually as you're doing your run, and when you do that, every single level you go up, you get a selection of 3 buffs and 3 cards. So if you change the way that you play it, then it becomes new every single time you play it. And the selection of characters, I think there must be, it's either 8 or 10 characters you can choose from as well. Like I said, I always use the summoner because I just love it, but you can use all these different characters, so it feels unique every run if you make it feel unique every run, or you can make it feel the same every run and try and master that one character like I do. I love it. It's a great game.
Yeah, well, sounds obviously very simple and easy to get into, and anyone can pick it up, it sounds like.
Yeah, to be fair, it starts you off slow. It does. But latterly, I think I don't know if I'll ever reach the end, if I'm honest. Like, I actually don't know if I will, because it is just that complex.
Yeah, deck builders usually require that large level of learning curve as well. I remember with Inscription at first, it never really clicked with me, and then people kept saying go back and play it, so I ended up actually really liking it in the end. So I don't know if that's a time thing for me, but Dunks, do you find the same as well? You a big fan of deck builders, or?
No. It's I'm quite impatient, and so I feel like I need like gratification quite quickly in games. So
Yeah.
I just haven't got the. It's just not my bag. I mean, I played Hearthstone a little bit back when I was a massive WoW player, but not for me. But you know.
Yeah. Speaking of quick gratification, did Alba give you some quick gratification, or?
Oh, did it heck? No, I have never adored a game so quickly in my life. It was unbelievable. So it's developed by, I think it's Us Two Games, who made Monument Valley on a mobile, which was brilliant. Anyway, so the premise of it is you are a little girl called Alba who goes to like a little touristy Spanish island somewhere, and there's a nature reserve that's getting taken over by some nasty big developer who wants to build a big hotel there, and you know, get rid of all like the lovely nature and things like that. And it sounds like proper whimsical, and not really something I'd usually go for. Although saying that, I love Stardew Valley. But the entire premise of the game is you are, maybe, I don't know, like an 8-year-old girl. I don't know how old she is, and you're going around the islands taking pictures of animals and cleaning it up. Like, so you're picking up bits of rubbish, or you'll put in you'll put in little wildlife nature boards back up. It sounds so simple, but it was one of those games, and it's a big thing that I can remember saying a lot about Psychonauts 2, is that I need to feel like the characters like in the game, and I don't know if I'm going to articulate it properly, but there's like certain games where like characters don't have a weight, like a weightiness within the world, and don't feel like they're there. Witcher 3 is a perfect example for that, where I feel like Geralt floats about rather than actually being in it. And I've got a point. So with Alba, is when she's knocking about, she's only little, but then as she's running, she'll start skipping, or she'll put her arms out to kind of do like a little aeroplane run, like she's a little kid just having a lovely time running about. Excuse me. And it's, I can't put a finger on why I loved it so much, but it is honestly kind of creeping into my top 10 games of all time. So as I was playing it, it was after Elden Ring, so I was kind of in the middle of not having a game really that I was probably into.
Big vibe switch.
Yeah, I just didn't want to feel sad playing games anymore. So yeah, I've got like Cyberpunk on the go, and me and Paul playing a bit Hell Let Loose and things. So lots of kind of quite heavy stuff. But from the second I started Alba, I didn't play anything else. Only maybe like 4 or 5 hours, but I like to spread my games out over a few days. I adore it, and it's a really great game. I think if you've got kids as well, because every time you take a picture, it will kind of tell you like the genus of the species, and there's a little bit more to it. So it's like a Pokemon Snap game, but it's kind of really emphasizes the importance of wildlife, and it's just so lovely. So like when you down at like the nature reserve, you can like repair a bridge because someone gives you like you do a chore for someone. It's like, you know, go and pick up 10 bits of rubbish, and I'll give you a hammer to fix up bridges. Quite like you give a 9-year-old girl hammer and nails and some planks of wood. I'm not gonna judge. But then like you fix something, and then animals start to return because you've made their homes a little bit nicer. I genuinely adore it. And most people I've recommended it to. So like Sean from Gamers Watch, I said it to him, and he said the same thing. He's like, just love it, can't not. And Paul, I don't know if Zoe's played it yet. 'Cause remember she said she downloaded it. But it's absolutely adore it. Completely opposite to whatever games most people have got on the go at the minute. Because it's just so chilled out, so lovely. It's like the only peril is just getting rid of some rich old developer. I love it. I genuinely love everything about it. Alba.
Yeah. I think sort of those more feel good games are stuff we need a lot more of, really, to be honest, because I remember reading, was it a couple of weeks back or something, that there was this is going to sound really, not crass, but what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of big headed. But I remember reading there was a study done recently where it was like, I think it was about 70 to 80% of games that are developed today, I mean, contain at least some level of engagement with violence. So whether you're like, killing something or hitting something. So I mean, it's nice to get a game that doesn't have that at the forefront. I remember the last one that I kind of really got into and was Omno when it came out in Game Pass, and then before that, I mean, and then obviously one of my favorite games of all time is Journey as well from the PlayStation. So there's sort of hints of little ones in and around there, and I'm sure if people, including myself, did a bit more digging around online, they'd find more small indie based developers just creating more experiences than actual games. Yeah,
like little things like Coffee Talk. I don't know if anyone played that. Just a lovely little thing you can chill out on in an evening. That's what the older I'm getting, like I said earlier, the more cynical I'm becoming about games. Like they've announced Modern Warfare 2. Like I just don't care. But I'm much more interested in just things I can have a nice time on. Imagine that. Having a nice time playing games.
I think as well, generally, I think all the time, at least whenever I'm going to look for a game to play now, I've generally come in from either doing work or at least doing dissertation stuff at the moment. And I'm always like, I could stick on something like Doom Eternal and just like, I suppose, like just waste my brain away for the evening. But like, there's kind of more of an incentive to want something that's a bit more quiet and just like more relaxing in that sense as well. So, I mean, I remember Connor, who writes for the website, wrote about Alba a while back, and I remember him singing its praises as well. So, I mean, I've got 2 glowing reviews of it now, so I'll definitely need to try and pick it up at some stage. I don't believe it's on Game Pass, but I mean, by the sounds of it, it's worth buying anyways.
Yeah, so I picked it up in a sale for £8. It's probably gone to £16 now. But I'd happily pay 16 quid for it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of very, there's really no segue to this one. I mean, I was going to say, speaking of very like relaxing games, and then I was going to bring up Sifu, which I played again this week. Sifu is the complete opposite to what you've talked about. It's like your dad dies when you're young and you're really angry for the rest of your life and you go and beat up people using Kung Fu. I mean, that's the easiest way to do it. But I only bring it up because it came out back in February, and I remember it was one of those games that didn't look like it was going to be as difficult as it was, and then it ended up being this completely insane, difficult learning curve for a beat-em-up game that I was just not here for. 1, don't have the time. 2, I'm not that invested in one game to give it that much time. So it came up with an update then recently that added, well, master difficulty, but first of all, like, no, please, nobody needs it to be harder. And then there was an easy mode added as well. So I was like, easy mode, you know what? Yes, please. I'll download that again and give it a go. And it's actually, I mean, I've seen a lot of, obviously I wanted to put this in this week because I knew Dunk was going to be on. Obviously, he has a very uncontroversial video about why Elden Ring needs an easy mode on Gamers Watch YouTube channel.
Still recovering from that.
No, well, I mean, YouTube's new system, no dislikes on that video. Fair play, Duncan. Alongside that, though,
you just couldn't see him.
The brilliant thing, though, I mean, when I was coming back to, because I wrote about it for the website this week, because I was genuinely, I had played Sifu originally and thought, you know what, I've managed, because the way Sifu works is, I'm going to explain for people who maybe don't know who are listening, but it's like, you start off and the whole premise is one life enough to learn Kung Fu, which I mean sounds kind of cheesy and crass, but I mean Sifu is kind of a cheesy game. And it's basically you have to take down 5 sort of karate bosses before you get to the guy who finally killed your father. It's a very already trodden ground in the sort of, oh my god, you killed my dad, now let's go hunt you down or something. So I mean, for them, it's extremely difficult, and it requires, I think, a large level of precision. I mean, as most sort of combat games, like anything like Mortal Kombat or something, getting button combos down and everything. But I was never going to master that. I saw it and I was like, you know what, I could waste my way for a few hours becoming a master Kung Fu. I just got my arse handed to me for 2 to 3 hours, and I was like, no, this is not what I'm here for. So I put it down and I went and bloody played something else. But the easy mode is extremely accessible. I mean, unbelievably so. I mean, I got through the whole game in about 3.5 hours. And the way the aging system works initially was that you'd continue to lose age, and it would stack and stack, so you'd lose more and more age. But the easy mode only has it that if you die, you only lose 1 year. So I mean, I entered the game at age 50, which I know is still like 30 deaths, but I mean, on a regular playthrough, there's no way I would have gotten as far as I did. So I mean, I thought that was a nice addition. I mean, there's a lot of weirdos online giving out about it, but I'm like, just play it on classic then. What do you don't have to play it on easy?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the main thing as well. I mean, the perfect thing as well. I mean, it's the same with the sort of the Soulsborne games as well. I will slog my way through some of them, but I would much rather play them on easy because it means I could get it done with quicker and move on to the next thing. Here's one that I think we all know everyone will love, which is a spotlight game we're moving on to, which is Flynn, Son of Crimson. And now, Dunks, I'm interested to get your thoughts on this first, because I wouldn't have heard of this game if it wasn't for you and your glowing recommendation in the Game of the Year list. So tell us a bit about how did you find out about it?
Harry told me to play it. So I kind of held my hands up. I had no interest in it because I think I was just getting quite sick of seeing lots of these retro style like platformers. And I just didn't pique my interest at all. I thought that's not for me. And this is when I was doing an Indie Choices thing every week, and Harry's like, just give it a go. And I sat down with it, and within minutes I was like, fuck me, this is incredible. And one of the things that really got me was I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it felt a lot like how I remember games were. So I'm from like the Mega Drive era, so kind of I've got up with things like Decap Attack and Rocket Knight and things like that. And it kind of in my head looked how they looked back when I was a kid. But then also it's got all these beautiful animations and we'll talk about it at length anyway. But it just so quickly I was like, this is the tits. I just could not stop gushing about it, and one of my favorite things at the moment. So it's been out like maybe a year or like nearly a year now. Pretty much every week on Twitter, I see someone else discover it via Game Pass, and they're like, "Man, this is amazing! Like, how good is this?" And and also because I mean, people know Emily, the community manager, quite well now. Anyway, didn't know her beforehand, so I'm not biased at all. And it's just really lovely to see like an indie game be like so beloved by literally everyone. Like I think the only person who's had a negative comment on it is that Cliff Basinski, epic guy, who says something about like, you know, holding down Y or pressing Y to heal wasn't intuitive. Shut up, mate. Don't know what you're talking about. It's just so much to love about it. It's nails. I find it really bloody hard. Lucky, you know, it's got really good accessibility options. It sounds amazing. I don't want to talk too much. I'll give you guys a chance to talk about it. But it just it's like I don't know. It's the perfect nostalgia. It's the perfect nostalgia game that just feels so current and modern as well. Adore it. Absolutely adore everything about it.
Yeah. Paul, you and I presume we played it around the same time when keys were going out for the game at one point. What did you think? Firstly, have you finished it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, I was just checking because, don't know what you do with sometimes in those videos. Maybe you just play for an hour and be like, oh, that's that done.
Sometimes, depends on the game. But Flynn was definitely not one that I was willing to put down. I actually, when I did the video on it, I did that, and then I had to go and do like some other games and stuff for video. So when I started it again, I started from scratch because I wanted to go straight from the beginning again. But I absolutely adore that game. Saying that, actually, a bit of show and tell.
Perfect.
I bought the physical copy of it.
Ah, yes.
And it is the first physical copy of a game that I have bought since Far Cry 5, I think, because there's a statue there. And it is the first physical copy I've bought in years because I love that game that much that I was like, I need to support this. I want to support this game, and it also came with some cool like little collectible cards and stuff like that, and I was like, that's awesome. So I'm actually going to build it into a frame a game. I'm going to put it like in a frame and put it up on that wall, because Flynn, to me, exactly what you said there, Danks. It's the perfect nostalgia game. It is exactly how I remember old games to play. I was the same. I started playing my dad's Mega Drive. That was the first console I ever played, and then moving on to like having a Game Boy and stuff like that. And that's how I remember action platformers to be like, which they're not. If I went back and played them now, they would be really difficult and the mechanics wouldn't be great. Whereas this is so well done and so fine tuned, and I loved every moment of that game. And at the start, I was like, "Oh yeah, this is good." It's a action platformer. And then as you start gaining abilities and get the different weapons and stuff like that, and I was like, "This is amazing." I loved the way that it progressed and the pace that it progressed at, and it kind of gave me vibes of like certain animations and stuff, and it gave me kind of Sonic vibes, which activated my nostalgia even more because I love Sonic games, and because there's a bit when you get the keys and the way they spin, it just reminds me of the rings on Sonic. It just immediately just took me to that, and there was just so many elements of it, and the actual storyline's fantastic. I would buy comic books off that storyline. Like, I would literally buy comic books of that and read them. Like, I would love it. I honestly, if they went out right now and went, we're selling T-shirts, whatever, I would buy it straight away. I'm a total sucker for this game now.
T-shirt.
Yeah, I adore it. I absolutely adore this game. There's just something about it that just feels so like pure in regards to gaming. It's I've not had a game like that in regards to AAA games and stuff that I've played. Nothing's kind of given me the enjoyment I've had of completing Flynn at the end. And like you're saying, Danks, it is hard. It's a difficult game. It's not easy. And when you get to the end of it, it just feels so satisfying. And it will not be the last time I play that game. I will play that game again. And I actually kind of want to see and test myself and see how fast I can play it. Like, not a speed run. Like, I'm not that good, but I would love to see how quick I could get through the campaign, and just blast through it to the end and just see how fast I could actually manage it, because I loved it. And I loved those battle rooms as well that you went into, and there'd be like a horde of enemies and you'd have to fight off the waves. Loved that.
And even like with the combat, and it does that really important thing, and it's something that we mentioned a minute ago about Trek to Yomi. It feels weighty with the combat, so when you hit something, just like a really tiny little screen wobble, but it just I honestly, like, there's nothing I can fault about it. And it was a kind of a big like turning point for me as well with indie games, because we kind of did indie choices as a bit of a joke, but then when I played that, it like properly opened my eyes. I was like, fucking hell, like indie games are amazing. They can be amazing, and they are amazing. Even though my favourite ever game is Stardew Valley, probably the most famous indie game of all time. But it kind of it opened me. It stopped me from being so blinkered and being like, "Man, don't look at that. I won't bother." So whereas now on Game Pass, I'm just that looks interesting. I'm much more open now to different kind of experiences and stuff, just because of Flynn. And I can't remember the last time, AAA or otherwise, again, I've seen a game that's like so beloved by literally everyone who I've seen and spoken to have played it. Every single person is like, this game, man. So
I think the oh no, yeah, go on there, Paul.
I was just gonna say, like, before I played Flynn, my kind of top platformer game from the past, few years was probably Ori, because I loved that to bits. But this knocked out of the park for me, like, just totally. Like, and with Ori being as highly regarded as it is, I think Flynn is just another one that I just want everyone to play. Just play it and give it the praise it deserves, because it is amazing. And there's so much, like Danks was saying about us knowing the community manager now and things like that. And when you're speaking to Emily about the game and stuff, and you hear the passion that is in that team behind the game as well, it's amazing. Like, and it's their community is actually so strong, and there's like people doing fan art, and you see like all these things that people are doing. This game is like nichely celebrated, and I want it to be like widely celebrated. Like, I love it.
I think the best thing for me was, because obviously you guys all mentioned like previous platformers you played and the nostalgia factor to it. Maybe this is showing my age a little bit. I'm not that young. I'm only 22, but at the same time, I didn't really have that growing up. A lot of the games I played was around the Halo era, so everything from Halo 2 onwards was kind of where I really got into stuff. So platformers weren't a huge element of my youth. So I mean, this was interesting for me to come into with a sort of newer perspective on these sort of more traditional platformers. Like, I played Ori and all that, but even I think Ori would be considered more of a Metroidvania sort of style game as opposed to platformer. But I mean, playing Flynn was just such a breath of fresh air, to be honest, because usually if I'm sitting down to a game, there's usually everyone always knows that maybe 30-minute to an hour slog of where you get used to the game's mechanics and you have to kind of adjust to what the game wants you to do. Flynn felt so intuitive from the get-go that it was like, here's the buttons, here's the attack, that's it, go off and do this or whatever. And I know you mentioned how great the story was, Paul, but I kind of have a tendency at times to completely avoid story and just get to the gameplay straight away. And there was a few times, and I've obviously gone back and played Flynn all the way through with the story and whatnot, but when I was playing it the first time, I was kind of like, I just want to see what this game is about first before, investing time into it. So I skipped through a load of stuff, and I love how you're able to just do that if you want to. You can just jump onto the gameplay and go through each segment, because a large part of those platformers is the replayability of, going through each and every level. And the fun part of that for me was always just that I could just do that if I wanted to. But I think generally, I mean, you see very few games like this. I mean, one I saw recently was Grapple Dog. I don't know if you guys have seen, which is kind of this very platform based, with a grapple. Well, obviously it takes in the 2021-2022 staple of the gaming era, which is the grappling hook as well into it. But I think there's definitely a market for more people to get into these sort of games as well. And I think as like myself, there's probably tons more people out there who haven't been able to play something like this yet and would greatly benefit from it. But yeah, I mean, any standout key parts of the game you have? Because I mean, generally my head always goes back to the music in the game, because it does give me that sort of nostalgia factor for sort of old sort of 8-bit games where you have the same track in different areas, but you associate them a lot more with moods as opposed to the place itself.
Yeah, it's really funny you mentioned moods, because this is going to sound real weird. It feels really cozy for me. I know that's a very weird way of describing a game. So, like, one game it really reminded me of. What was it? I think it's Castle of Illusion, back in the Mega Drive with Mickey Mouse. And like one of the opening areas was just like a forested area. And it was, like the opening levels of Flynn is a forest, but it's a 2D game. It's pixel art, but I just felt maybe it's like the familiarity of it triggering this nostalgia in me. I don't know, but like you said, like with the combat, it just felt so natural. Like it felt like a game I'd played before, and it was just welcoming me in. say the same as you. The music is just exemplary. But I'd highly recommend everyone follows the Studio Thunderhorse Twitter account, because every now and then they'll post like gifs of the animation, and you don't realize it when you're playing it because you're just so kind of laser focused in on it. The animation is unbelievable in that game. It's bonkers to think that, you know, really tiny in the studio as well. And I really like that you love it as well. Also, because we've got a bit of an age gap. You're young whippersnapper. I'm approaching 40. But obviously, kind of regardless of age, like, obviously it's ticking my boxes because of the nostalgia, and then but it's ticking your boxes for a completely different reason as well. But yeah, to answer your question, I can't pick out a single thing I love about it. Just as a complete package, I just completely adore it.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I really liked about it, and this is just a really kind of random thing in the game, but I was walking back in an area. I was trying to find one of the hidden pieces in it, and I was walking back in an area, and it was you know the bit where the big ice ball falls and it chases after you, and you got to run through. You got to break the ice and get through it. Well, after the ice ball fell, I backtracked over it and kind of followed along. And as I progressed along, I just seen this figure kind of appear, and I was like, "What is that?" And then I moved closer and closer and closer, and it was like this woman, and then she just faded away as I got closer, and I was like, "What is that?" And then it was actually JP, one of the friends of Gamers Watch, and panel member, sorry, and he asked about it as well, and it was the community manager Emily explained that hidden throughout the game is the ghost of Flynn's mother, and such a random little detail, but I think it just goes to show like how much was actually put into this, like just little Easter eggs and things like that, just hidden away that I had no idea what it was, and then I asked the question, and then it was, and I was like, wow. And then I think I've seen her one more time in the game, but there's random areas in the game where if just at the right point where you're standing, she will appear in the very kind of edge of the screen and stuff like that. And I just think that's such a cool little detail to throw in there. It's amazing. But yeah, there is no, again for me as well, there is no kind of single detail that I'm like, that was the main thing, because I genuinely enjoyed the whole thing. I think equally, if I was gonna pinpoint something that I particularly liked, and kind of going back to that nostalgia value, is I got a sense of, you know, when you first get the sword, the Crimson Sword, it gave me that kind of vibe of getting the Master Sword in a Zelda game, and kind of going up and getting that, and that's when obviously you get your power. You have that first big fight where you get absolutely burst first, and then you kind of explode with power. I loved that. I absolutely adored that, and it just gave me that kind of like Legend of Zelda, kind of the old school Legend of Zelda, where you get the Master Sword, and you're just like, yes, here we go.
And
so yeah.
Sorry, but like just to interrupt quickly. So like even like with the weapons, it doesn't let you have them long enough to get bored before it gives you something else to play with. So then you'll get the axe, and you'll get a lightning spell, and then you'll get the what's it called, the claws, or the punchy gloves.
Yeah. And it's got
Yeah.
the skill tree as well to then develop those skills that you learn throughout the game, with the training at the main village, and I really like that as well, and kind of earning your gems and having a purpose for the gems as well, because there's so many kind of platformers that you earn coin or gems or whatever it is, whatever the kind of gimmick is to that game, but it kind of means nothing, or it just goes towards your score at the end of a level. Whereas I liked in Flynn that you actually use that as a currency to gain new abilities. I like that it had purpose.
I think the one thing I really like about the skill tree system in Flynn as well is that it doesn't feel overly important to make the right decision in a skill tree. Like, I mean, at least with a lot of skill tree games, the problem for me is always just this overbearing amount of like random stuff that on its own doesn't have a huge impact, but you really want to be leveling up one certain area if you want to continue playing the game well. Whereas with Flynn, like, I mean, you can do the whole game probably without a single upgrade. Granted, it'll be a little bit more difficult, but I mean, not that taxing on your, I suppose, sanity. You'll be able to, and if the upgrades in general are just kind of, they're neat little add-ons as well. But I like that it, like most of the stuff in Flynn, you can play it how you really want to play it. Not everything is, you have to do this a certain way. Like, as you mentioned, Paul, like, you love the sort of like random wave encounters that you can do. I couldn't click with those at all because I like to be kept on the move. I don't like to be doing the same thing for 5 waves or whatever, which is funny because I spent most of my childhood playing Call of Duty Zombies, which, I mean, has probably pushed me out of that now. But so, like, I liked the option that, like, if I wanted to go back and play that at the end, yeah, I could do that. But if I don't want to and I just want to completely skip that, that's totally valid reason as well. So, I mean, the main thing I would say that's great about Flynn is just the way that, yes, it's a linear game, but it can be unique in so many different ways for whoever's playing it. You don't have to do certain things. You can do extra bits if you want to. You can skip the story if you want to. You can indulge yourself in it. It's pretty much open to everyone. And I think that's one of the best things about the game, to be honest.
The thing I really liked about the kind of challenge levels with the kind of like horde mode that you had is that, like, as you got to the last few waves, it would introduce, like, before you got to those characters, those enemies later in the game, it would introduce some of those enemies, and I loved, like, I actually would complete them and then play them again because I like trying to master how they moved. I just totally nerded out with this game. Like, that's the best way I can explain it. I geeked out to the max. I was like, I want to know exactly how that enemy moves and how to defeat it without it touching me. And I just kind of got to that point where I was like, I want to master this mechanic. And because each one was so different, because obviously you had the knights with the big massive swords, and they would hit the ground and the green spikes would come out and hit you. But then there was ones that were kind of looked similar, but they were like tree people. I don't know what they were, but and they would heal themselves after you got them down to certain damage, and you're like, damn it, like, and when you're fighting 3 of them at once, and you're like, how can I do this? And I just loved trying to figure out how to master, like, and beat each enemy the quickest way possible, like, and without getting damaged the best I can. Laterally in the game, it's pretty much impossible not to get damaged, but it was, I almost used them as like training grounds. I loved it. Really enjoyed doing that.
Yeah. Well, we're coming near to the end of the segment now. Is there any sort of final parting words for Flynn before we move on to obviously shouting at your socials and everything? All has been said.
Yeah, I mean, I probably just end up just repeating myself ad infinitum with it. I really love, and I kind of also hate the fact that I missed it, but it's like a real Kickstarter success story as well. Genuinely quite gutted that I missed out on it on Kickstarter. It's really lovely, and obviously like knowing Emily and Case, the developer, by proxy, it's so lovely to see kind of how much love the game gets, because I don't speak to a lot of developers and kind of community managers and stuff, but I just the amount of success they're starting to get from it, and I hope it continues because they deserve it so much, and I really genuinely love them and the game.
I think the only thing to add to that, like, that I could add is it's amazing, and play it. Like, just go and play it and download it. It's not a big game. It's a great filler in between all games, and I think it's accessible for anyone to play, especially with the accessibility options. So if you look at it, or you maybe play the start of it and you're like, oh, this isn't for me, it's too difficult, just press start, go into the settings. You can change it to God mode and just play through it and just have a bit of fun. It is brilliant.
So I think if you've listened so far to the amount of praise we've given Flynn, I think it's well worth giving a go. I think all of us can agree on that. I believe it's available on Nintendo Switch, Xbox, PC. Is it on PlayStation?
I got a feeling it's coming to it, if not already.
Well, it will be there at some stage, so keep an eye out. Keep money in reserve on your PSN account if you're planning on buying it. With that being said, I'm going to throw it over to you guys one last time. Doug, we'll start with you. Where can people find all the work you've done online and everywhere else?
So me Twitters is at dunks. Super imaginative handle there. Or the main one is at Gamers Watch Crew. And you can watch us every Monday on YouTube at 7:30 PM. where we just talk games we played. No silly news nonsense. Just us being funny in it. I'm pulled on it every now and then.
And Paul, you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Paul Tyre Gaming, or you can check out at Thistledew Gaming on Twitter, or you can find us on YouTube under Thistledew Gaming, and we release episodes every Wednesday at 5 p.m. GMT.
Oh, fantastic. All of those will be linked down in the description below. If you're listening to on audio platforms, I suppose rewind 30 seconds and listen to it again. But thanks a million, guys, for joining me this week, and I hope to see you guys again in the future at some point.